Hey, micro folks. Today is chapter 9, business and cost of production, where we're going to get into all the different costs of production and all the different cost curves, which is massively important to help with module 3. So, this is that chapter for module 2 that is which of these does not belong. It's this one. So, let's just go ahead and get into it and see um, what's going on here. Yeah, here we go. All right, so economic costs are the payments that must be made to obtain and retain services of a resource. We have two different types of costs: explicit costs, for which there is a monetary outlay, in which case you can get a receipt. Accountants love receipts. So, if you're an accountant, here's your chapter, right? Um, So monetary outlay, you can get a receipt. It's money changing hands. Implicit costs are the opportunity costs of using your cell phone resources, and this also includes a normal profit. So this is basically like you want to open a business, you need a storefront, you find out your long lost uncle died, and lo and behold, he had a storefront downtown. Let's say it's on Gay Street, right? And all of a sudden, you find out it happened. Your accountant would look at you and say, "This is very fortuitous. You don't have to pay for your storefront." Your economist friend would be like, "It's more of a hassle because now you got to figure out how much that storefront's worth and whether or not you really need all that space and you should rent it out, or whether or not you should be putting your business in it." So, and that's really the case in economics. You need to find out whether or not the opportunity cost is worth it for you to put your store in there, or whether or not you need to rent that space out and put your store somewhere else. Because if you can rent that space out for 2,000 a month and rent a place for 1,000 a month, and then pocket the difference, that's what you should do. And that's all about opportunity cost. So it's all about what you really, how much money you can make with that. Accountants look at it as, hey, it's free space. Economists look at it as like, how much money can you really make off that space? And it's just a different way of thinking about things. Accounting profit is revenue minus explicit costs. Economic profit is the accounting profit minus the implicit costs. So basically, revenue minus explicit costs minus implicit costs. So revenue minus explicit and implicit costs. So a little bit different in that. So looking at it with a picture, total revenue is accounting profit and accounting costs. Explicit costs only on the right side. On the left side, the economic opportunity costs are your explicit costs, and your implicit costs, including the normal profit. And then anything above that is an economic profit. Now, note, any economic profit will bring other people into the industry or into the business, into that area. So if you're making normal profit, nobody cares. The thought is anybody can make a normal profit. Economic profit, anybody makes economic profit, people are going, that's an opportunity. And they're going to try to enter your industry. And that will decrease your profit because there's no magic red light saying, hey, yeah, no, you don't need to come in anymore. So that one gets a little ugly after a while. We'll talk about that when we get to chapter 10 because got some personal experience in that one. Long ago when I was young, my grandfather did some stupid stuff like that. So short run and long run with this. Short run, there are variable inputs and there is a fixed plan. So you have variable and fixed cost in the short run. In the long run, there are no fixed costs. Everything is variable. The firm can adjust the plant size as well as enter and exit the industry. So everything is variable at that point. So we can go back to that. Yeah, we're good. All right. Total product, everything you produce. That's what you're producing at that point, and that's everything that you produce, let's say, in a given time frame. I like to go with days and weeks. Short run. Production really is a short run thing. Yeah, if we do go back to this thing, in the short run, you make what we call a production decision. In the long run, we make what we call an investment decision. So in the short run, you make those production decisions. How much am I going to produce? In the long run, you make that investment decision. How large am I going to be? Am I going to build a small plant, a medium-sized plant, or a large plant? Am I going to buy small capital, medium-sized capital, large capital? So that's basically why, when we're talking about these production relationships, you're talking about short term. And when you're doing that, really say day or week. Okay. So keep it really short term. So total product, how much am I making in a day? How much am I making in a week? Marginal product, change in the total product divided by the change in the labor input. So if I hire more workers, how much more do those workers produce? I hire one more worker. How much more product do I produce with that one additional worker? And that is that worker's productivity, basically. And don't get too attached, because when we get to chapter 17, I may fire that worker. And so this will lead us to what we call marginal revenue product. And so average product is the total product divided by the units of labor, which will get us to our productivity in that sense. Law of diminishing returns, slightly like law of diminishing marginal utility, but not quite, because it's going to go up before it goes down. Law of diminishing marginal utility just starts downward. Assuming that resources are of equal quality, which is kind of BS because not all workers are the same, and that technology is fixed, and we add variable resources added to fixed resources, at some point marginal product will fall. There's a rationale to that. Basically, if you have a plant and we start adding workers into that fixed plant with a fixed capital, I always do one plant, one machine, and add workers into that. At some point, they're going to start tripping over each other, right? And it just happens. You're going to do that. And so as they do that, your marginal product is going to fall. Also, if you start hiring, and they say resources are of equal quality, but we all know that's not true. So let's get into the real world a minute. If they're not of equal quality, who did you hire first? You hired the best worker first, then the second best worker, then the third, then the fourth. And if you look out there and you've got 20 workers, somebody is the 20th best worker, right? It's just true. And that means that we have an issue with worker quality as well. So both of those in the real world explain the law of diminishing returns. So here we go. Units of the variable resource, which in this case is labor, 0 to 8. Total product is 0 to 70. Marginal product is 10, 15, 20, 15, 10, 5, 0, negative 5. So we have increasing marginal returns 10 to 20, diminishing marginal returns 15 to 5, and negative returns at 0, negative 5. All right. And so that is basically how that's going to look. You notice your red line on the bottom graph, bottom right, it's going up and then down. That's how that should look. Your average product's just kind of a slight hump, and total product, it's kind of a parabola looking thing. It goes up and then comes down. And that's about how that one should go. Short run production costs. Total fixed costs are costs that do not vary with output. Variable costs, total variable costs, TVC, costs that do vary with output. Let's stop there for a second. Fixed costs are going to be those things like rent, your loans, loans on capital, those kinds of things, maybe insurance, that kind of thing. So there's not many fixed costs. Variable costs, that's going to be your wage bill, your utilities, your resource costs, how much it costs for you to get your resources in there. All of those things are going to be variable costs. Total cost is going to be the sum of total fixed cost and total variable cost. And total cost is going to be equal to total fixed cost at a quantity of 0. So remember that. That'll come in handy later. So here is a quick table for that. Total cost, units, quantity 0 to 10. Total fixed cost is 100 all the way down. It's always 100. If it's 100 at 5, it's going to be 100 at 0. It's going to be 100 at 10. Total variable cost is 0, 90, 170, 240, 300, 370, 450, on up to 930. So total cost, you're going to add those two numbers, and you're going to go 100 to 1030. And then you're going to get your average cost data, which we haven't done yet, but we'll get that. And so you're just basically dividing those numbers by Q. So you're dividing for average fixed cost, which, by the way, is completely useless for everything in Module 3. But average fixed cost is column 2 divided by column 1. And it's just going to be a decreasing number. Average variable cost, which is column 3 divided by 1, which is a very important number come Module 3. This is going to determine your shutdown point. Goes 90 to 93. It's going to go down. It's going to kind of be it's kind of a flat curve. I liken it to that curve. I liken to those decorative bowls that everybody puts balls in on their coffee table. It's one of those. ATC, which is a U-shaped curve, is column 4 divided by column 1, 190 to 103. And then marginal cost, which is change in total cost divided by change in quantity. And that's going to be a J-shaped curve. And so that is that. And so here are your 3 that we started with. You notice that fixed cost is in red. It is at 100 all the way across. Total variable cost starts at 0, comes up, and it's kind of a parabola. Total cost starts at fixed cost and looks like variable cost. The difference between total cost and total variable cost is equal to fixed cost. So that is the way that looks. Then the variables the averages that we looked at before, average fixed cost, like I said, I wouldn't worry about that one too much. You won't need that after this chapter. The other 3 are extremely important in the next module. Average variable is going to determine your shutdown point. Average total is equal to marginal cost at the minimum average total cost. Marginal cost, like I say, is equal to average total cost at the minimum average total cost. And if average total cost is going down, it is greater than marginal cost. If it is going up, it is less than marginal cost. So yeah, and they don't have marginal cost in that, so you don't really see it there. And that should be a better U shape, but it's really not. That's on them. So there you see ATC in red, AVC kind of the little bowl beneath that, the little decorative bowl beneath that, and then AFC is just a downward slope. It's just a downward sloping thing. And there you go with the marginal cost added to it, and you see as ATC is falling, it is above MC. ATC is equal to MC at its minimum, and as ATC is rising, it is below MC. So that is kind of how that goes. This is kind of an interesting thing to me. This comes from earlier and now. The marginal product, average product, down, go down, and then marginal cost, average cost go up. They are exactly the same. So one is production and one is cost, but they are just flipped from each other. So that has always been interesting to me, and that will be true for every firm. Manufacturing costs for selected nations, if for 100 is USA, Switzerland's about 120%, Germany's just under 120%, Finland a little bit less than that. Australia, what was that, about 110 or so. Japan just over 100. South Korea right at 100. We're at 100, of course. Poland just under 100. China about 150. About what is that? About 95 or so. 90 maybe. Mexico just over 80, and then Indonesia just over 80. Long run production costs. The firm can change all the input amounts, including the plant size. So all costs are variable in the long run. So you have a long run average total cost curve. Think of it like a Noah's Ark. Okay. So now you consider all costs in terms of average total cost curves. So if you had these 5 different ATCs and you were starting a firm, which ATC would you want? That's the question, right? So you've got ATC 1, which would be really easy to get to 20. ATC 2, which you could do 20 and 30 from. ATC 3, which you could get all the way to 30, all the way out to 50. 40, you could do 50 and 60, and 5, really only 60. So, I mean, that's a question. Just think about it. There's no right, wrong answer. Just think about it for a minute. Which of those ATCs would you want if you were starting a new firm and you had that investment decision? So this is what I was talking about the Noah's Ark curve. The dark blue line is basically Noah's Ark. That is your long run ATC. All the red lines are your short run ATCs inside of it. And then you're going to pick the short run ATC, which best serves you inside of the long run ATC. Here's the thing with that. On that, you have basically economies of scale to the left, diseconomies of scale to the right, and in the center are constant returns to scale. So you have unlimited number of plant sizes, as it says there at the top, but you have to wonder about, like, do you want to be at economies of scale, diseconomies of scale, constant returns to scale? If you have economies of scale, we're dealing with some labor specialization. You've got managerial specialization. You've got you have efficient capital and some other factors that work with you. Constant returns to scale, you have some of those things, but not all of those things. So some of them are working for you, some of them are working against you, and they're a drag, right? Diseconomies of scale, you have some control and coordination problems. Some things are just not with you. How easy is it to coordinate across countries, across the ocean? Like, how easy is that? You have some communication problems. How easy is it to get this stuff done across time zones when somebody's 5 hours behind, 6 hours, 7 hours behind? It's not that easy. And because you may be so far away from people, workers may feel alienated. They may feel like they are the redheaded stepchildren at the redheaded stepchild plant. And that's a problem. You're going to have to deal with that at some point. And so once you do that, you're going to have to deal with it, because if you don't, you will have shirking. And people will just be like, yeah, I don't care. What happens, happens. You're going to have to deal with that. And so, and that's going to cause diseconomies of scale. So your productivity is going to be extremely low. People are not going to get stuff done, and people just won't care, because even if the stuff isn't getting done, people won't care, because they're like, hey, I'm not really getting paid well enough to care. So y'all have a nice day with that. Minimum efficient scale, or MES, the lowest level of output at which long run average costs are minimized. That could help determine the structure of the industry. You also have a natural monopoly, which where long run costs are minimized when only one firm produces the product. This is how a lot of monopolies get their stuff done. Like utility companies typically are natural monopolies. You got one firm. If one firm produces, it's more efficient for customers, less costly for customers for one firm to produce it than for 2 or 3 firms. And so governments grant natural monopolies. So this is what I was pointing out before about that. Economies of scale to the left, constant returns in the middle, diseconomies to the right. And so you don't really want to be out there to the right. Long run ATC, you really don't want that thing popping up like it does there at the bottom. You want it to continue approaching zero. You also don't like the idea on this right one that the long run ATC is so far over to the left. You would like that to be a little bit further to the right and go that way. So you would like that to happen as well. Applications illustration: rising gasoline prices for delivery firms like FedEx, UPS, and pizza delivery. Sometimes they have to add surcharges into that, and we end up with things like that. The Weber Metals stamping machine used to be called like Verson. It stamps a ton of parts in a day, a ton. So it's one of those things that you look at and it stamps a ton, but it's really expensive to get. So it's expensive. Not everybody's going to have one, but if you have one, you can stamp a ton of parts in a day. Successful startup firms, they're not going to have many people, but they're going to be very nimble and be able to do a lot of things. And so, they're going to be more to the left, but they're, as far as the cost, and they're going to be able to do some things very differently. Aircraft and concrete plants. There are probably 4 or 5 aircraft manufacturing plants in the United States. There are thousands of concrete plants. You have to have a concrete plant near every place that you need to do concrete. So there are thousands of concrete plants. There are not many aircraft plants because basically it's a very specialized labor. And so specialized labor, specialized all those, specialized production facilities. Living on the cloud now. Many firms require massive computing power now. Previously, companies had to buy and operate their computers to obtain their computing power, and firms that experience uncertainty in how much output they can sell in the future face that risk investing in all that computing power and those computers. Cloud computing allows such firms to outsource their computational needs and allows them to be a little more flexible in what they do, which is a boon for them. That's it for 9. Next up is Module 3, where we cover all 4 market structures: perfect competition, monopoly, monopolistic competition, and my favorite, oligopoly. Take care. We will see you in the next module.